Oh, God.
Yes, you should get it. Yeah, look at me. From the other thing. Whoa, look at that. It's a strong sit.
I've got all the brushes. Regression.
If I do a speed test,
Can't resolve that monitor. Well, the trick is,
yeah,
right? I'm sharing the presentation slides to the Hangout, so if people watching it, they can essentially click on it if they want. Sweet. Or I could essentially choose it myself if I want. Like that. But I would still appear down here in the corner, so that switches. Reverse image like that? It's fine on the other side. Yeah. It has to do with like when you're doing left or right gestures. So they reverse it. It's just weird. So, welcome to the July Omaha Linux Users Group. I am your host, Captain Stubing. Jon Larsen. I'm a systems engineer with AIM. How's it going, gentlemen? So, Fedora 24 has been out. Yes.
lady.
Gentleman and lady, sorry. Yes, Fedora is out, 24. That has been some fun with upgrading some of that stuff on my own systems. Still haven't got the Fedora working on my home system, and I just sort of disabled it this morning. So, just in time, after I get the presentation done, I reboot it and it just goes to heck. So, another thing for me to fix at some point. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the trials and tribulations of working with OpenHab, which is a home automation system. This is not a deep dive kind of a thing. This can be a pretty basic overview on the system itself. So, what is it? It's software for integrating different home automation systems and technologies into one single solution that allows overarching automation rules that offers uniform user interfaces directly from their website. So, everyone's heard of the Philips Hue, those little bulbs that you can control and they have different colors? That'll work with this. The Nest thermostat, there's a way to work with this too. That's one of the next things I'm going to play with at some point. But it's kind of like trying to be the whole enchilada in the board. Oops, that's the wrong key. So they try to be vendor neutral. It actually runs under a Java virtual machine. So you can run it on pretty much any system that will run that. It is open source, that's good. Yay. Paging, that's nice. That's not a problem. There are iOS and Android apps so that you can control the devices. And there are various APIs, so if you wish to write your own items, like there's a RESTful interface and things like that. So what I've chosen to use is a Raspberry Pi 3. I originally started with a 2 when I first started in December playing with this. And I thought maybe it was a problem with the 2, so I ordered a 3 when that became available. And I'm using a stick from AOTech called the Z Stick. Pass that around. So this little guy right here. This has been the joy and the bane of this entire project. I had issues with the stick. Many times I would plug it in and Linux would not even recognize it. It would say could not enumerate device. So I downloaded the tools from their website and put it under Windows and still didn't see it there either. So it wasn't very consistent. I would factory reset it and it would see it, and then later on it would stop seeing it. I'm not exactly sure why. It seems to be running pretty good now. It's been consistent since 8 o'clock last night. That's when I finally got it working.
Send it
Last
back.
night. What's that?
Get another one.
You know, I might get another one, but this was $45.
They'll send it back.
Yeah. I hadn't waited so long to do it. I have a Honeywell alarm that you can buy a Z-Wave module for, but that acts as a controller. It doesn't act as a node on the system. So you can't say, hey, Honeywell, turn on the alarm, or what do you see, Honeywell? The Honeywell has to act as a controller, which is what this Raspberry Pi is doing. You may have heard of other controllers like SmartThings. They're very similar. They can run with Z-Wave and some other protocols. But speaking of protocols, there are a few that I'm not going to talk about X10. That's been around for a long time. But Z-Wave and Zigbee are the 2 big ones right now, with Wi-Fi coming in for a lot of these newer devices. But they both operate on the 802.15.4, the low-rate personal area network protocol, which I didn't know until I started playing with this setup. Interesting, the difference is that Zigbee operates on 2.4 like your Wi-Fi, but Z-Wave is running in 9.15. Now, what are some other 9.15 items that you might think about?
Cordless phones.
Cordless phones used to be there, yeah. My weather station is on 9.15. There might be remote control cars that use that, possibly.
Not a good frequency to use.
It could be noisy, as we'll kind of discuss. Going through some of the message boards, I noticed that there are always people talking about upgrading to a new home controller for their system, but they're reluctant to do so because they have 200 nodes on their system. Yeah. So when you get into replacing things, like you buy a wall switch and you install it in your wall, you're literally really reluctant to try to change it out for new technology after you spent $50 on one switch. Now,
That's expensive.
yeah. So essentially, I've got $200 in this whole thing. You know, $70 for the Raspberry Pi, $50 for the adapter, $40 for that, and then like $50 for that. So it's pretty close. It can be a bit excessive.
Still early.
It is very early, right? There are so many different technologies that people are trying to do. I mean, just think about the Wi-Fi item for the moment. Osram, which used to be Sylvania, they have a Lightify product where you can buy their light bulbs, but they comes with a separate little controller package. So if you want to talk to those light bulbs, you have to have the app on your phone that talks to that hub that talks to the bulbs. Right? Hue has a little hub that talks to the bulbs that you use the app to talk to. You can see where this is going. Everyone's making their own little hub to control their own devices. And they're usually using Wi-Fi to do it, and then they choose whatever protocol they want on the other side. Cree has bulbs that work on Zigbee, and they're built just into the bulb. There is no controller. It just pairs into the network. And those are at Home Depot for about $14 a bulb, which isn't too bad because Cree bulbs, when they first came out, were 20 bucks. Now this is a connected bulb with connected technology for like 15 around it. But I would prefer if all the addressing is built into the bulb. And once you install them, you just talk to the bulbs directly. But you know what the fault in that system is, right? Turn the light switch off. So go around your house and hardwire everything and put cover plates on it. Nobody can turn anything on or off. There are people who've gotten farther with their home automation systems where they use their phone as a presence detector. So when they get near the house and it gets on the Wi-Fi network, everything starts to happen in the house. Maybe the alarm undoes. Maybe the garage door goes up. Maybe they bring the cooling down in the house. Or you give somebody a little fob, which does the same. I think you can get to the point where as you walk around the house with the presence, it like turns the lights on and off.
Possibly in tune to the Macarena.
Well, I'm sure you could program it to do that. There is an API, right? So I don't know if I'm quite ready for that, especially people who have like locks on their house and all that. But remember, a smart lock is for what?
Smart people.
All right, let me rephrase it. A lock is for what?
Honest people.
Honest people.
That's right, keeping honest people honest.
Honest or unskilled. Or would be.
So you should probably plan out what you plan to do. So in my case, I was wanting to, what do I want to control? So I originally bought the wall dimmer switch because I want to control my outside lights. Right? If I wanted to do motion detection, I'll do that later. But for now, I want to do my wall lights. This is what I originally bought, and it sat in the box for about 2 months before I installed it. Because generally these require a neutral hookup. Most switches, they're just a wire that breaks the one lead. This one requires all of them. So hopefully, when they wire your switches, there is a neutral in the back of the box that you can access to work on. I lucked out. I want to do a timer in my bathroom for the fan, so I can just turn it on and forget about it. I haven't gone to see if the controller requires a neutral, but I haven't seen if there's a neutral in the wall for that yet. But we'll find out. So that's the wall dimmer switch. I didn't get the lamp module until about a month and a half ago. And that's this guy. Sorry, it's plugged in right now. This was like $35 from Home Depot. It's pretty much very basic. There's one little button on top of it to turn it on and off. Did I put a picture of it in here? It might be farther down. This has been much easier to work with than this guy, because my workbench is in the basement, and this is all the way upstairs, which will become apparent shortly. Environmental sensors. This is my thermostat. You can actually buy a Z-Wave environmental sensor. It's like a 5-sensor unit. Not only does it do passive infrared, it does temperature, humidity, and they run on those little CR123 batteries. They last for a couple of years. So you can just set that up in the corner. Cat sets it off. Although they're supposed to be good with pets. Kind of wait and see. Okay. this is where things get really annoying and confusing because a lot of time happened between when I actually installed it and when I actually got it working. So essentially, you're using apt-get to do the install on Raspbian. So I've already gone through the Raspberry Pi. I've installed Raspbian using Nukes, which came with the unit. I bought an all-in-one pack, Verlos. So it came with HDMI, the Raspberry Pi 3, which has Wi-Fi built in now. Heat sinks in a case and a power supply. That's like $69, which is pretty good. And it looks like this. You can choose. It's nice to see they switched to micro SD cards now. But the fact that they give you an HDMI cable with it, that's not bad considering they're like $6 to $10. Sorry, my cord's only so long. Can you see it over here if I move it? You guys can come up and look at it when you want later. So you can install it via Git, and it's usually in the repos as well. There is an administration console called Habmin, and I had to do that by hand. By doing the Git checkout, it was not in the repos. And I'll show it to you in a second. There's a reason why you really want this thing. Because by default, it's all command line and config files. Not really that bad if you're used to Linux, but there are hundreds and hundreds of lines in these things. And they recommend you install the demo files so you can look at all their configs to kind of get an idea. So I did that, but it does cause a little bit of confusion in the interface, and I'll show you that in a second. One important thing, in the groups file, you really should include the OpenHab user in the dialog group so that it can talk to the serial port of the USB key. And I should add to this, which I haven't done, which I just figured this out when I got here, the USB device, in our case, TTY, or actually, let's just switch over to TTY ACM0, has to be owned, or has to be read-write for everybody for it to work. It was 600, the system would not even see anything. So when I got here, I couldn't even talk to it, which can be a little confusing. By default, you get this OpenHab default.config. They recommend that you rename it openhab.config. I just copied it over. Boy, it's kind of cutting everything off, isn't it? I didn't change any of this stuff up here. I just let it be default. Trying to find the... you can kind of see other things it does. The Google Calendar integration. So here's where the Z-Wave binding is defined in the file. Here's where I had to put in the port for this device. If you don't have that plugged in, that device does not exist. It gets automatically created when you plug it in. That's the device, the Sigma Designs. It's a USB to serial adapter. That's how I know that the thing's running. If you don't see segmented designs with this AOTech stick, it doesn't work. So routinely it would go back and forth on me and say it couldn't find it. Part of the frustration of trying to work with this thing. And if you are copying these files, make sure they're owned by the OpenHab user. Because when you're using habmin, you're making changes, it'll write out to those files for you to make the changes. Oh, here we go. 2 more files you need to make. There is a demo already because I installed that, but I'm calling mine home. So you have to have a sitemap and an items. The items contains the items that you want to control. So like, this is my lamp, right? And the sitemap is like the groups of items, like this is the basement or this is the office. These items are in this room. And so it kind of divides it on the display that way. So in the web interface, wrong mouse, here's where it kind of divides this group up between the office and the basement. So the only thing I don't really care for, that's the URL you have to use to get to it. It's a bit of a pain. It runs on port 8080. It's its own web server. It's not like you have to set up Apache. But yeah, I might make shortcuts to that. Or once you bookmark it, you'll probably be in better shape. But there's the office and there's the basement. So when you buy a new device, say I just bought this lamp module, it has to be paired, very similar to Bluetooth. And when I was talking about the switch being a problem, general rule of thumb is you're going to be around a foot distant from it. So you have to be right next to it to pair it. Not only do you have to hit the button to pair it, but the controller has to be in pairing mode too. They do a little dance. On the key itself, you have to shut down OpenHab, unplug this, walk over to the device, then you have to hit the button for a moment to put it into pairing mode. The lights flash. And the same thing with like any module. Each module is going to be different how you pair it. Some of them don't have buttons. They automatically go into pairing mode as soon as you plug them in. So you kind of got to be wary about how you do it and when you do it.
Sounds like a lot of trouble.
Yep. So one of the nice things about how Z-Wave works, since it's a mesh network, is once I pair this switch and I talk to it, it now becomes a repeater for other devices. So if I put something in between here and the controller, they'll be able to talk probably better than if they're 30 feet or 40 feet. It all depends on how your house construction is. So the more devices you have,
So if you've got enough of them, you can send a signal across town.
well, in a way, yes. Have you heard of the potato in Africa? It's a little telephone device that uses mesh networking. So what they've done is kind of made an asterisk mesh network in Africa. They just bring these things in and they hook up with each other, and they all have phone service.
Nice.
Yeah, and it was very cheap. Oh, devices. The whole thing about people having 200 devices or 200 nodes on their network, They must have spent a lot of money to get all those devices. I only want to do a few things. I want to control my outside lights, right? I want to take my telescope out and say, lights off. They all turn on. I don't have to go to 4 places in my house to turn the lights on. I wish I could do it to the neighbors too, but that doesn't exactly work.
I don't think they'd be too happy about that.
Yeah. Why are my lights off? So my next step at home is to pair the stick with this light switch that's in the wall. And interesting thing about it being a dimmer is when you tell it to turn on, it just sort of goes, it brightens up and turns on. It's kind of a neat effect. Or you can say, I want you to turn on at dusk at 40% power and stay at 40%. So it doesn't have to be super bright, but you can still see a few things. It's pretty handy. So my lamp module is scene capable, which means you can design scenes. I haven't really messed with this yet, but say you want to watch a movie, you can activate a certain scene, and all those items that are part of that scene kind of react to that control. There's a great video from a few years ago where somebody was using Tasker on their Android device, working with their home automation, and telling it, like, I want to watch a movie, all the lights dim down, TV turns on, and the Blu-ray menu comes up. Or if he said, no, I want to watch Netflix, it would switch to Netflix on the display input. That's like 4 years ago. He was using a device called Vera Lite from Casa Verde, which is the same kind of a controller. But he also hooked up the popcorn maker in his office.
The picture I had in my head when you said it would put together a scene instead of having a scary movie control the lights.
Yes, you could. It's a lot of little things you can do. So in my experiment, I bought this little cheap lamp module. I've used timers all the time. You know, get the wired timer, you set the time on it, you plug it in, your lights turn on and off. And then we have the daylight savings time change, and you're going to go reset the timer 2 times a year. And it gets darker at different times of day, so maybe I want to know when the sun's going down and adjust when the lights change based upon that activity. Pretty sure it's in there. I just haven't found it yet. So let's look at the interface. This is that Habmin interface. You have a series of bindings in here. And if we just scroll up and down the list real quick, you can see there's quite a few of them. Let's see if there's the Nest binding. So if you want your thermostat, you would work with this one. There's something called Heat Miser. No relation to the Christmas cartoon, probably. But I had to have it talk to the Z-Wave first. Oh, look, there's the Samsung TV. So if you want to turn the TV on and off, you could probably do that. So here's my Z-Wave binding. Here's where I've got the port defined. I have OpenHab set up as the master. So it's the master controller in my network. For my devices, I've got 2 nodes, node 1 and node 2. Node 1 is the stick. Node 2 is the lamp module. If I want to, I can actually put the controller into include mode right from this display, but it only gives you like 30 seconds to pair something. So,
Could be a quick run upstairs.
well, I used this really long cord to try to walk near the doorway to my hallway upstairs. I said, okay, Kelly, hit it. had her hit the pairing upstairs and it still didn't see it. Although, when I was at home, it also gave me a node 12, but it couldn't identify what that was. I didn't know what it was, and I don't see it now. So it's something obviously in the house. Maybe this is node 12, because it couldn't get any information to say what it is. Because if you look at some of the properties of the node, there's the manufacturer, here's your device ID and type, power. These are the different classes that you can do for a device. So it's a switch scene capable. You can look at the status. Here's where your packet status is. So right around now, it just sent a packet about a minute ago. It is alive, so we've got a green light. Dead is false, which means it's working. Right? So I have not been able to edit the name. So I don't know if it's coming in a later version, or I don't have something. But one of the things I had to do when I hooked all this back up here is I had to heal the network. And that's sort of like if you had a power outage and you're trying to reacquire all your devices and such. If I was to look at the neighbors of this node, the only neighbor is node 1. So you can kind of see where that mesh network starts to build out to the different devices. There's a Panasonic TV, radio, network time protocol. Maybe I need to get that turned on. But there's people adding to this stuff all the time. There's an entire database of all these devices. I haven't gotten into rules yet. Here's my sitemaps. Here's demo. These are all the things defined in demo. We could actually go look at demo. So this is everything that demo has programmed into it. You can see it has a lot more stuff than mine. But I'll use it as a reference. Nothing in the outside temperature yet. That is an API issue because I've looked at the logs and it's trying to talk to Yahoo weather APIs. You have to have a key and stuff like that. I'm hoping that there's a replacement for that because I want it to talk to my weather station to get that kind of stuff. I don't need to go out to the internet. Although, if I can get to Weather Underground from that, okay, all right, that makes sense. This person is a seller, and it has ceiling lights, stairwell, washing, and workshop. So this person is obviously
well off.
Got a lot of money, and you can see how it's nested stuff. Oh, it's 22 degrees Celsius in the kitchen. It must be cooking food. Multimedia, volume, radio. There is a option built into this where you can build your own home control panel display. It's like a device that you would set up, like a tablet, and it would mirror it so you could walk up and see all these details and like touch it to make it do things. It uses something called MQTT, which I'm not familiar with, but it's like a control mechanism protocol. But as you can kind of see, having this in here makes all the difference in the world because you don't really have to edit those config files. So here's my office and basement, and I have my switch defined, which is a light. So if we go back to So this says switch. It's a lamp. This is the label I'm giving it. I tell it that it's a switch. And this is that node number that I want it to reference. So when I actually go through the menu, it knows what specific device I'm talking about in this config file. I have not found a reference to that node number in the config yet. So it's not referenced in this. So you still have to edit the config in some respect. But the sitemaps work pretty good that way by editing them. Items and groups. These are all the items in your network. You see these are all assigned to demo. This person has shutters on their windows that will automatically open and close based upon the control. Mine is all the way down at the bottom because that's part of the home network. And I haven't quite got a grip on what persistence is. I'm assuming that it has to do with if the power goes out, what was the state of the light, so that when the power comes back on, it doesn't go full brightness. Which, incidentally, is a neat trick that the Hue light bulbs do, that if you have a power outage, their default state is on. So if you install them in your bedroom, and there's a thunderstorm in the middle of the night,
Wakey, wakey!
be prepared for a little bit of a rude awakening as the intense radiation from the bulbs spiral. Now, they may have fixed that in a firmware update, but I've heard people talk about it. It's rather amusing. So persistence is something to look at. Demo blinds, there's a blind controller. I wonder how this radio works. So that's the nice thing about having all these little items in here, is you can kind of figure out how to set everything up. Then there's automation, which I haven't gotten into yet, but there are certain rules you can set for that. Here's your bundles you have installed. This has not worked for me, the log viewer, unless it's just taking that long to show up. But
Is this built in Java?
yeah.
It's not like the log4j does.
What I've been doing is I've essentially been just opening the file and letting it do its thing. So here's our weather for the demo side. Trying to get out. There's some MySQL stuff I need to work on too. It's supposed to save historical weather data in it, but I haven't found anything that says run the SQL file to initialize your tables. You can use MongoDB if you want to, then it's more free form because it's no SQL. Yeah. I'm trying to remember the term to use for that. It's not a. It's like a schemaless, or I suppose it still is a schema because you can define your data. I'm not an expert on NoSQL, so I'm not going to talk about it that way. So, this was essentially about 12 hours of getting this thing to work satisfactorily, just so I could flip the switch and the light turns on. Right? So.
Tech people are the laziest people in the world.
Yes, we are lazy.
Hours and hours of work.
So the funny thing is, we were testing this before we got ready, and I put a fan on the lamp module. Guess what? It's smart enough not to let a fan work. This is not a dimmable, capable CFL either. So if you're using an incandescent or a dimmable bulb, it will actually brighten up and go down. So
no good for fluorescents.
what's that?
Not good for fluorescent lights.
Right. And there is an Android app for this. So you can control it with your phone or your tablet. So before I go on to that, any comments or questions on OpenHab? This is the added extra I'm adding into it, which is Weex, or Weex, whatever it is.
WeWeather.
I actually got so frustrated with this project on OpenHab that I went and did this in the meantime. So this is a complete different item that I set up in the meantime. I've had a weather station for quite some time, probably about 4 or 5 years, and I've used various programs. I used PYWWS, which is a Python program. It runs as a daemon on the system. It was a pain in the butt, but it supported the most sites of weather collection. Weather Underground, a weather map, and a few others. How many people know that IBM bought Weather Underground? They also bought the Weather Channel, but not the TV portion. So it'll actually say the Weather Channel, an IBM company.
That seems a bit selective.
Well, that's the way they want to be. So I didn't think my OpenHab would be long enough to support a full hour, so I kind of threw this in on the end. The guy wrote it in like a winter because he had nothing else to do and he wanted to learn how to write Python. So he did it. It was like between 2008 and 2009, according to his website. It certainly is pretty full-featured at this point. You can upload to popular weather sites. So I've replaced PYWWS with this on my system because it was running on my home theater system, and now it's running on my Raspberry Pi 2, which I originally bought for the OpenHab project. So my number of Raspberry Pi devices are growing. I need to get a 0. That's the next thing. Yes? You make a comment, Dave?
Yeah, I was going to say, there's still a lot of Raspberry Pi cluster projects that you could tackle.
I think he's giving me a hint.
Jon Larsen, let's go.
There you go. Here, everybody bring a Raspberry Pi next meeting.
Raspberry
Try to make a
Pis and
cluster.
keys both accumulate, but nobody's sure where they all come from.
Yeah. So I have an ambient weather WS1090. It was like $100. Pretty cheap. It's not without its weirdness. Sometimes when you're looking at the charts, it tends to go haywire briefly. Like, how could it be 150 degrees and then back down to 80? And I think that was a communications problem. It really likes, you know, it's the 915 megahertz spectrum. It really likes to have that straight path to talk. I've since moved it in the basement somewhere else, and it's actually done much better. It does come with its own USB cable, and the odd thing about this cable is it's the same connector on either side. They're both USB-A's. So it's not like a printer where you have a B on one side and A on the other. It's an A on each side. So it takes like 3 AA's, but you can actually run it off the USB cable, which is pretty handy. Helps you with power outages. I wonder if I can get into my... I don't know if I can get into it from here. I don't remember the IP address. Oops. There's a demo file for you. But I installed that out of apt-get, and there's like one setting file. Since I'd already done PYWWS, I already had all my API keys for OpenWeatherMap and Weather Underground, so I just plugged those into the config file. And as an added benefit, apparently there's a whole section on syncing files to a remote web server. So the Raspberry Pi doesn't have to be the web server itself. The computer will be. So I'm already got a Linode system, so why not use that? So I did. This was earlier today when it was 91, only heat index of 109. Oops. But we can pull it up directly here. Here's all the graphs that it's doing. Wind speed, wind chill, or heat index. Ever important dew point. There's the house temperature for inside the house, since it has an internal sensor. And you can kind of add stuff into the layout of the template that you want. So looks like we're having a storm out by Grand Island right now. This might be coming to get us later on this evening.
The heat temperature sensor, basically?
What's that?
Will that work with a heat temperature sensor?
It's got to usually be on their list of supported devices, but it supports a lot, you know.
Well, I kind of do this for like computers, like closet. So it'd be nice to have be able to chart
Like pulling stuff out of LM sensor.
or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. Oh, interesting. I mean, there's some projects that you can use RRD tools to make all those graphs.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
Like MRTG or Cacti. Cacti kind of does a lot of that too. You just have to have like it scan and mib for SNMP. Didn't I talk about Cacti once?
It's
Like a long time ago, I think I messed with it.
Where do you get your radar weather feed?
That is the National Weather Service. So if I was to actually click this, it'll take you to the actual page. Funny thing is, you have to have Flash for this to work. You still have to have Flash. Hopefully they change that. But there's a link to that specific URL on this page. Oops. Radar.weather.gov. It's like radar PHP, and then you give it an ID, which is OAX. The product, which is this type of overlay, and you can say a loop, yes or no. And it gives you that little animated GIF. So it's like it's automatically generating it from the page.
You have parameters such as the duration of the radar. Is all that automatic?
That might be automatic. I'm not too familiar with the specs on their page setup, but I'm sure there's a page out there that talks about it. Because you can change out, you know, the ID numbers to a different. OAX just happens to be the ID for Valley, so you might be able to stick another one in there instead.
How much data are you gathering? Like, what kind of metrics do you have?
Wind direction, barometer. Let's see if I can. outside temperature, and then there's dew point on top of it. The wind chill is in blue, heat index is in red. You have hourly totals for rainfall, but there's also the rate of the rain, like how much per hour as well.
Are the ag tech guys in this? Like the agriculture people?
Yeah, there's specific ones for agriculture that are out there.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But they've probably got several of them all over the place because it's such a large geographic area.
Yeah.
They want to see how much. And I have a friend who's actually in OLUG, but he hasn't been in any meetings. He works for a company that works with that kind of equipment.
Yeah.
And like all the ag sensors, moisture sensors, and stuff like that.
They said they had to pretty much build their own sensors because like they can't find them.
And it's not surprising. Probably cheaper that way too.
Yeah.
There's
Your home weather station is just a freestanding little unit that you've connected to your system through a USB cable.
So there's a control panel that talks to the station that's mounted on a post in the backyard. So the Raspberry Pi does its talking with the panel.
Through a USB cable.
Yeah. There is a memory store in the panel where it'll kind of keep that for a while. And if you don't plug something in, it just shuts it off at the end, and the computer will just keep pulling that data. So if you have it off for like a day, it'll kind of still download that data out of the panel. One time, I had a hailstorm that destroyed the wind speed. Was it Adnan? Thank you. And it was like a $15 part. So you order the part from Ambient, and they send it to you. You just plug it right in.
So where do you have your external set? Where's your external mounted? Is that in the backyard or?
Weather station?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on a post.
Okay.
So my father-in-law helped me put in like a 8-foot post in the yard. So I have 2 feet below and 6 feet above, and I have a pole attached to that. So I just changed the batteries last month. I have to get up on a step ladder to open it up, the batteries. I use lithium for those because they last like a year, sometimes a year and a half, especially in the cold. Yeah. But one of the other options for Weex that I haven't gotten ready yet is you should be able to have a webcam that would show up on the same page as your template. So if you want a sky view, that seems to be the big thing, is showing a view of the sky while also gathering the data about it. So he has a few other programs. Wonder Fixer is a utility for users of Weex or WView that will compare data in SQL with data at Weather Underground and optionally republish the missing data. So if you didn't send any data out and you have more data, like say the last 6 months, you can send them data. So from a standpoint of Weather Underground, you have to sign up and get this. So Weex sends this data out for me as well. So this is what the Weather Underground interface looks like. And you can see these are other people around me that have weather stations installed in their yards. Then you can go down and there's history, kind of the same thing. No precipitation. So my neighbor is a Channel 6 meteorologist. He will sometimes pull data from mine just so he can see what the temperature is outside. It's kind of amusing. But I originally started with Open Weather Map. Those guys really need to work on their site. because it's a little problematic. Come on, boys. Okay, I just searched for it, and now it's taking me to another search box.
But it's very flexible.
Yeah.
So you use universal jQuery.
So I kind of stopped putting too much faith in them, right? Just because it's been really hard to work with their product as it's being displayed. However, I mean, it looks pretty, and in fact, this plugin in Fedora does pull data from OpenHab. So you go weather provider, there's my API key, so if I want to pull the data, I have to put my key in, so on and so forth. But I can't like say, give me a list. It's like how to connect your station. Well, why don't you just show me the stations around in that area I just searched for? It's a little analogous, right? Annoying. So, oh yeah, if you want Fahrenheit, you gotta click the button every time. It doesn't remember that. There's no cookie that sets it to remember the Fahrenheit or Celsius. You really can't bring the demo of the weather station here, because I have to take it all apart, right? But
What model is it that you have?
the WS 1090, which has been discontinued, this is when it got covered with snow and it stopped working, because it got frozen in place. That's before I moved it to its permanent location. So I spent the first winter at the new house on the back deck. But they make an all-encompassing one now on Avnient's website. Davis is like the big one.
They've got a solar powered wireless one.
Yes. You don't have to have batteries.
Yeah, for $160.
Compatible with Weather Underground. They sell a lot of stuff. They even have weather radios too. Oops. They will also sell you an outside webcam. So if you want to provide a video feed to Weather Underground from your house, you can. So you can see the sky. I don't know if they have all sky cameras yet, but that'd be the next logical step. Which one did you say, Craig?
The WS 1400 dash.
Okay. This is probably the most close to the one that I've got, the 1075, and that's $60.
Sounds.
But I don't think this has a USB plug on it to pull any of the data.
Is your barometer out on the sensor pole or inside on the
It's on the
control
pole.
unit?
Yeah. Everything's out on the pole, except the internal temperature.
So you're sure the barometer's out there?
Mostly sure.
Okay.
It would read different if it was inside versus outside.
The barometer?
Yeah. Wouldn't it? Slightly.
If you can measure 6 feet in the air, yeah.
And well, that's the one thing I did when I put in Weex. I went out and stood on my ladder and put in all these settings in the config file. It's a bit better than what I'd done previously. I took a screenshot of when I was standing up there because it was light out and I couldn't see it.
What resolution? Like once a minute or?
This updates every 5 minutes on the page because the rsync is running,
Readings
but the readings are pretty much all the time.
every second.
Close. You don't want to like burn the batteries out, but you can see the wind like updating every so often on the little panel. Yeah. That's kind of nice. It does a trend over 3 hours.
Because the barometer reading by itself doesn't tell you anything. You need to know which way it's moving.
Now the hardest part about installing this is sometimes the wind has blown the unit slightly off. So you're going to go back and put it back to north. Because the element does have a north on the wind speed direction device. So you have to get that pretty good. I need to put a screw through the pole at the bottom so it doesn't rotate for me. Oh, look at that. It's been up for 24 days. 0% full on the moon. That's interesting, the wind vector. How to do that chart based on speed. So north is that way.
Is that direction too then?
Yep.
Yeah. This is not the International Space Station. This is the signal quality from the panel to the device. So right now it's at 100. So that's good. But you can kind of go back. Monthly summary. So this will produce NOAA text as NOAA would use it. So you can actually see how theirs would produce this data. You could provide the link to people. There's weekly. So it changes all the graphs.
It's been Saturday.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah. Tell when the storm was. Wait a minute.
My rain gauge only showed
So
an inch
3rd
and
to
a
the
half, even
4th?
though it rained all day long.
Did it rain Sunday night?
Is it UTC?
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Saturday.
I remember it being wet Monday morning. Because these are days. So like the 28th, the 29th, 30th, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. That's right, it rained on Saturday.
So do you think the ambient weather is better than the accurate?
Probably. Yeah. Maybe you want to look at Weex first to see what other people are using. Yeah, there's quite a few different ones, isn't there? The Pete brothers. Well, so Craig Wolf has volunteered next month to open the door.
Okay, yes. Open the door.
Say hello.
To my little stretch.
Run the meeting.
Oh, I did say run the meeting. I guess I need to ask him about that. You know, stand up there, say your name, give
Yeah.
a presentation.
Yeah, see, there we've gone off the cliff.
So where will you be, John?
I will be out
Far
in
and away.
You'll be eating hamburgers.
at the Nebraska Star Party.
And you'll be dressed just like that.
That's great. Oh, you haven't seen that picture?
No, I haven't.
It's pretty good. So they have.
I have to
So
link to that. One of my coworkers.
I've had a few ideas reading all these Raspberry Pi things regarding the Star Party, right? I know how to make a little Raspberry Pi FM broadcast station. You could broadcast music all night while people are looking at the stars. If they want to tune in, they can. Play space music, all fun. You do little radio interviews.
Star Trek theme.
Yeah. It's 2001, Space Odyssey. I could buy another ambient weather station, set it up on the camper.
There you go.
See, there you go. That's the one.
That's the one. I have no use for your FM radio, but
It's a contentious item whether people listen to music on their computers or not. Bob Dunn always used to get shortwave radio when he was in surveying. So he'd hear the world while he was thinking.
yeah, they took this stock picture and I think grafted in the telescopes.
No, really?
Yeah,
They didn't have that laptop.
I think that is that a Mark Donkey? You got his name on there anywhere?
Fred Holstrand.
No, that's where the
picture came from?
Picture came from.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
fine.
Mark Donkey. The drone video that he was showing earlier, done by the same guy that grafted those telescopes into the. That's an actual picture of frontiermen up in North Dakota and the sod house.
Well, it looks like it's going to be clear for a while.
You could remotely connect to the meeting.
Well, let me talk about that for a second. There's one cellular tower
Mesh network.
that's up there. And it's either AT&T or US Cellular. Neither of which I have. So, I'm sure I could spend a lot of money to get connectivity up there. Work would probably love me to have connectivity while I was up there because I spent the entire afternoon on Wednesday logged into work. So I missed all the presentations last year. And the raffle. No, wait a minute. I got a flashlight. That's right.
So connectivity kind of misses the point of isolation.
So yes. This Friday is Public Star Party at Mahoney, as well as the meeting night. So if you're out in Mahoney and want to see something, I will probably be there.
You're going to Mahoney?
Yeah. Go down the fort down.
I'll be at the meeting.
Well, you have officer duties to perform.
How large a telescope do you have?
I have a 10-inch telescope. It's a Dobsonian, so it's got a rocker box and oh, nice. It looks like that. Although that's a little bit, I've made some changes since then. But that's the basics.
A friend who constructed his own, he used these large cardboard cylinders that
Is his name Mark O'Donnell?
No, this guy was in California. And he found this old 1950s television camera dolly. He stuck it on that so he could move it around. And the thing was huge and heavy. It was sturdy.
I would imagine. The bigger the telescope is, the more you have to take out with you and wrestle with it. Something which I'm becoming very aware
on
of.
top, and we were using it there.
So shall we turn the lights on one more time? See it work? Yay.
So can geeks in China turn your light on and off?
Nope.
The Big Bang Theory.
Oh, I should make a note about this lamp controller. I did say something about how you had an issue with the fan because it's a dimmable module. I first was testing this with an LED light bulb, which had a nasty habit of flashing every 3 seconds. The bulb was in there, just was like, has to do with the load of the electronics on the device. So if you're buying these things, you want to get the ones that are rated for your bulbs that you're using. Or that specific LED bulb is probably too cheap to use in the device itself. So maybe a different bulb.
Well, and that's not putting out a 60 hertz smooth sine wave either.
No.
That's why your motor didn't work.
Yeah.
So it's just spitting out, what, DC or something?
Hence the name of it being a lamp controller. There are other controllers that you can get too.
Modulation.
Probably. But let me end this and then we'll keep talking. So. End this.
Yay! Thank that John guy, whoever he is.
I don't know who that is.
Night, everybody.